There were hundreds of people at an anti-Trump, anti-Musk protest at the Tesla dealership this weekend in Columbus, Ohio. There were hundreds more in Tucson, Arizona, at the Tesla dealership there. There were scrappy anti-Tesla, anti-Trump, anti-Musk protests, including some in bad weather in Little Hadley, Massachusetts, at North Phoenix in Arizona, at the Tesla dealership in Stanford, California, at the Stanford Mall, and this one at Grand Rapids, Michigan, which was just at lunchtime today. In Memphis, Tennessee this weekend, there was a big protest against Trump and Musk, including a specific beef with Elon Musk in that city that's starting to get people really mobilized and really fired up in Memphis, Tennessee in particular. Watch.
Protesters in Memphis on Saturday say they're concerned about government leaders and their decisions and gathered together to take a stand.
This is about connecting people, connecting the community. When I look around, I see, like I said, a lot of different age groups, but it's going to take more than that. It's going to take connecting with all people who feel as though their voices aren't being heard.
People held signs saying protect your rights, education is right for all, protect immigrants, and more.
I would like to see us get back to the values that made us a great country, the ones that are outlined in our Constitution. I'd like to see us follow it.
The hands-off movement hopes to remove leaders they believe are making harmful decisions, reverse the damage, and reclaim democracy.
For here in Memphis, we've got a lot of issues with XAI, with Musk coming in and unilaterally making decisions that are dangerous to Memphians.
People are hoping for a real change.
I think this administration is so steeped in lies that people are beginning to believe those lies. And we've got to get back to a place where the truth actually matters.
The reference there to damage being done in Memphis, Tennessee in particular, is about another one of Elon Musk's companies that doesn't get as much attention, XAI, his artificial intelligence company, which is apparently running a supercomputer facility in Memphis that's getting a lot of people there upset. They are using gas-powered turbines to power that facility, turbines for which they reportedly do not have permits. And the resulting air pollution concerns there led not just to that protest this weekend that you saw in Memphis, but also to a packed town hall with the city's mayor, who has essentially been defending the company and taking a lot of heat for it. Also, another packed town hall with other local Memphis leaders who are definitely not defending Musk's company. And some of them are saying that they want XAI shut down in Memphis as a public health menace. So all of those concerns dovetailing in the great city of Memphis, Tennessee. But, I mean, all across the country, the protests are not going away. There's more and more of these to cover every single week. Look at this one, this big one at Little Rock, Arkansas, at the state capitol this weekend. This is Arkansas this weekend. This was also another big one in Johnson City, Tennessee, a big turnout there. At the protest in Johnson City, Tennessee this weekend, they also did a food drive in conjunction with their protest, since Trump, of course, has cut support to food banks. This was Laguna Beach, California yesterday, in Southern California. This was yesterday at the Wisconsin State Capitol, a big crowd protesting cuts to the VA and services for veterans in Wisconsin. Same goes in Little Manistique, Michigan, on the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. Michiganders there protesting the cuts to veterans care in Michigan. This was Medina, Ohio on Saturday. Hundreds of people protesting in Medina. This was just an hour away outside the Geauga County Jail in Chardon, Ohio, where people protested against what Trump is doing to immigrants. This was a vigil and protest for immigrants and their families in Little Elizabethtown, New York, yesterday in the Adirondacks. This was a march in Tennessee at the state capitol today. People wearing mortarboards like it's graduation, people standing up for immigrant kids and their families who are being targeted by Republicans in Tennessee state government, who are aping some of what Trump is doing at the federal level. This was today in Washington, D.C., people protesting against Trump shipping people from this country to that foreign dungeon in El Salvador with no legal process whatsoever. We're going to have more on that subject in a moment. This, too, was Washington, D.C. today. Federal workers protesting against Trump's massive and indiscriminate cuts to the U.S. government. And then, of course, there were the couple that you might have heard about even before I started talking tonight. The two massive, just massive anti-Trump rallies that were held by Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Look at this. Last night in Salt Lake City, Utah, deep, deep red Utah. They booked a 15,000-seat arena thinking, well, they'd be safe there, right? They'd be fine with a venue that size. They'd never fill that up. Well, they ended up filling all 15,000 seats in that arena. Then another 1,000 people packed onto the floor. Then 4,000 more people on top of that crowded outside the arena when they couldn't get in. They turned out 20,000 people in Utah last night. And frankly, that 20,000 turnout in Utah last night was dwarfed by the size of the crowd that turned out to see Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez the night before in Los Angeles. Look at this. This is Saturday afternoon in LA. The crowd estimated at 36,000 people. Senator Sanders, of course, has spoken to some large crowds in his time as a very high-profile politician. He says he had never before spoken to a crowd of this size. 36,000 people Saturday in the open air outside City Hall in Los Angeles for Senator Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The vanguard of the uncompromising, unapologetic left wing of the Democratic Party, who frankly can rightfully take an I told you so lap around this country, considering their years-long warnings of oligarchy and how letting the billionaires take over would be the end of American democracy. Yeah, man. You are here. And, you know, if you are looking at that footage and you're looking at all these fellow Americans protesting against the authoritarian takeover, against the destruction of the government, people trying to defend immigrants who are already fully into the secret police and abductions part of the authoritarian nightmare. You see your fellow Americans trying to shore up the remaining institutions we've got to not give in, to push back. You see people showing up at these events to show their fellow Americans who might be worried or angry or just unhappy with what Trump is doing, to show people that they're not alone. I mean, let's say you're one of this really, really tiny handful of friends in Henderson, Kentucky this weekend, who decided that even though there were only a few of them willing to do it, they were going to get out there on Highway 41 this weekend, and they said they're going to be back there next weekend too, even if it's only this little handful of them who feel brave enough to do it. If you're looking at this footage and you're thinking about what all this protest means, large and small, and whether it changes anything, whether it moves the needle, I have just one more thing to show you. Because this was Saturday in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is home, of course, to the most famous and prestigious university in the whole country, Harvard University. This was a stand-up Harvard rally that happened in terrible rain and sleet and cold in Cambridge, Massachusetts on Saturday afternoon. The theme was effectively courage, not capitulation. People are trying to shore up Harvard, to tell them that they've got the gravitas and the weight and the wealth, that if they can't lead, who can? That they should not capitulate to Trump's threats, to Trump's demands to let him essentially take over and subjugate the universities. It has thus far been war on international students, war on academic freedom, war on campus free speech. It's been war on government research funding. It's about to be war on university endowments. And so these people turned out on Saturday in the wind and the cold, one protest among a gazillion. But in this case, they were just telling Harvard, don't do it. Don't capitulate. Stand up. This was Saturday. And tonight, here's the banner headline in the Boston Globe. Quote, Harvard refuses to comply with Trump's demands, says it won't, quote, allow itself to be taken over by the federal government. And they, of course, knew what that would mean. Here's the headline in the New York Times right now. Headline, Trump administration will freeze $2 billion after Harvard refuses demands. Harvard University said today that it had rejected policy changes requested by the Trump administration, becoming the first university to directly refuse to comply with the administration's demands, setting up a showdown between the federal government and the nation's wealthiest university. The reaction from the Trump administration was swift. On Monday night, officials said they would freeze $2.2 billion in multi-year grants to Harvard, along with one $60 million contract. Other universities have pushed back against the administration's interference in higher education, but Harvard's response, which called the Trump administration's demands illegal, marked a major shift in tone for the nation's most influential school. You know, the law firms that Trump has been extorting, basically, threatening them and then telling them to pay up if they don't want more pain, right? The law firms that Trump has been extorting, according to new reporting in the Wall Street Journal, Trump has been making the law firms negotiate their protection racket extortion deals with Boris Epshteyn, who does not work for the U.S. government. He just works as a kind of personal fixer. I think of him as sort of a universal donor of menacing atmosphere to President Donald Trump and all things that surround him. Boris Epshteyn is under felony indictment in Arizona. He has pled not guilty. He did plead guilty to disorderly conduct in Arizona after he was accused of repeatedly groping women in an Arizona bar. Mr. Epshteyn also denied allegations that he was selling administration jobs in this second Trump term in exchange for cash bribes. But now Trump has him of all people, personally working out the protection deals that he is extorting from the nation's great law firms, where they allow Trump to dictate their policies at the firm, and they agree effectively to pay Trump by giving free legal services to causes he chooses. And in return, apparently Boris promises these firms that the Trump administration's not going to hurt him anymore. He's having Boris do it. That's the kind of deal-making we're talking about here. It is straight out of season 1 of The Sopranos. And much like the law firms, colleges have thus far been trying to negotiate their own deals. Not that differently from what we're seeing from all the law firms. But Harvard tonight, Harvard, the big one, Harvard tonight says no. And they knew what it would mean, and they said no. And they said, we are going to fight. And I don't know what put the steel in their spine to do it. But saying no, we're going to fight was an option for everyone. Harvard has now taken that option, which means that fight at least is on. Sherrilyn Ifill is here tonight. Martin O'Malley is here tonight. So much to come. Stay with us. Okay, the tape is a little hard to hear, but if you listen closely, you can just make out what the president is saying as he enters the Oval Office today with the president of El Salvador.
Criminals next. Yeah. I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's big. All right.
Laughter all around. That was Donald Trump today talking to the president of El Salvador, a man who calls himself the world's coolest dictator. And you could hear there what sounded like Trump promising that he's about to send to a prison in El Salvador the, quote, homegrowns, meaning U.S. citizens. He says homegrowns are next. You're going to need to build about 5 new places. The Trump administration has flown hundreds of non-U.S. citizens to this foreign prison in El Salvador already, including 10 more that they flew there this weekend. Even though the U.S. government has sent these people to this prison, the Trump administration says they have no protection under U.S. law there, that this facility doesn't answer to U.S. courts. The people sent there are just gone. They're sent into that prison maybe forever with no way to be heard, no way to contest whatever the designation was that got the U.S. government to send them there. Certainly no way to get out, ever. Are homegrowns really next? Would the American president send American citizens to indefinite, totally lawless, apparently permanent imprisonment in El Salvador as well? Is he open to that? Apparently, yes, he is.
If it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem. Now, we're studying the laws right now. Pam is studying. If we can do that, that's good. And
If we can do that, that's good. Pam, meaning Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. So he wants to send American citizens to foreign prisons where U.S. legal protections don't apply at all, where people can be held for the rest of their lives without ever having a day in court or any sort of process. He says Attorney General Pam Bondi is, quote, studying the laws right now to see if he really could do it because he'd love to do it. It was only last week on Thursday when the Supreme Court ruled unanimously 9-0 in favor of a man named Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's a legal resident. He's a Maryland father. The Trump administration admits they sent him to that prison in El Salvador by mistake. The Supreme Court effectively ordered the Trump administration to facilitate this man's return to the U.S. from that El Salvadoran prison without explicitly defining what that would look like. The Trump administration has insisted that they can't return him, and they don't intend to. They said that the man's fate is up to the president of El Salvador for some reason. Today in the Oval Office, it was a reporter who finally asked El Salvador's president if he would please return this man to the United States. The El Salvadoran president called the question, quote, preposterous. Of course he wouldn't. So we have here a constitutional nightmare, a legal nightmare, obviously a moral nightmare. Cheryl Eiffel is the former president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. She has been sounding the alarm about this. She has argued that Trump will start testing constitutional limits by trying to deport U.S. citizens from American prisons to places like El Salvador, and that Americans, in order to stop that slippery slope where it is, must take on the challenge of caring about and standing up for U.S. prisoners. Quote, many of us have been working on how to legally head off this nightmare, but public outcry and support will be essential. Are you ready to march for the most despised members of our society? Will you call your representatives about those who are imprisoned? If you can't feel for them or their families, remember that this is just a stage in a plan that will land ultimately at our own doorsteps. Every one of us deemed inconvenient by this administration will be under threat. And every time Trump is successful, he grows more emboldened and more convinced that nothing can stop him. Joining us now is Sherrilyn Ifill. She's the Vernon E. Jordan Jr. Distinguished Chair in Civil Rights at Howard Law School. Ms. Ifill, it's been too long. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Rachel.
You wrote this piece over the weekend, sort of sounding the alarm. He's talking about U.S. citizens. He's talking about U.S. citizens. This is a constitutional end. This is an end of constitutional protections in the United States in a really fundamental way. That was before today's Oval Office meeting, where the president very cheerfully confirmed that, oh yes, he's talking about doing this to U.S. citizens too. Is the president actually moving faster than you thought he might? Are you at least pleased that the American public have to see this as clearly now as you have been?
Yes, and I very much thank you for this conversation tonight, Rachel. I've been sounding the alarm because Trump has been saying it over and over. In fact, he started out when his family first met with the president of El Salvador a couple of months ago. And he said then that the president of El Salvador was interested in housing U.S. prisoners. He said it again the other night as he was exiting or entering his plane. I don't remember which one it was, where he talked about this again. He said, you know, for our worst of the worst, people who knock old ladies over the head, people who push people in front of subway trains, or if you had a bad judge and a bad prosecutor who didn't do the case right because they only care about politics. He's been repeating this over and over again. He tweeted that he can't wait to see people who attack Teslas face incarceration in El Salvadoran prisons. And by now we know Trump a little bit. We know that when he keeps saying something over and over again, he is not joking. We know that he is incapable of holding his cards close to his chest when they are having discussions about these things. And we've seen two new reports. One was in Politico this weekend about plans. One is Stephen Miller's plan to do a mass denaturalization of naturalized U.S. citizens who are incarcerated. We saw, can you believe it, the name Eric Prince again who apparently is involved in an effort to use private prisons in El Salvador and in other countries, with the U.S. perhaps entering into a treaty of cession, something I really think about when I think about maybe getting Alaska from Russia, a treaty of cession so that the U.S. would control the territory in that country, and therefore there could be no claim that U.S. citizens were being moved off of U.S. soil. It's crazy and diabolical, but it's real.
When Attorney General Pam Bondi does this studying, as the president said today, when she looks into the legality of this, which the president continually says he doesn't understand, doesn't really care about, wants to find out whether or not it's legal, it's being looked into, what is she going to find when she looks into U.S. case law and constitutional protections to find whether or not this is something that they could legally do?
Well, it's a strange thing. If she didn't find the Fifth Amendment that says every person in the United States, person, not citizen, is entitled to due process of law, cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process, which should have stopped the deportation of Mr. Abregu Garcia and others who received no due process. I'm not sure what she's likely to find with this look. I think there are two things to think about here. One is that, as almost everyone knows, there are nearly 2 million people incarcerated in the United States. Most of them are in state prisons, not in federal prison. The person who assaulted the old lady is most likely not in federal prison. There are about 200,000 people in our federal prisons. So I'm not sure the population that Trump is looking at, if it is the state prison population, that creates complications for him. And in any case, we have a constitution that prevents cruel and unusual punishment, sending folks here who are incarcerated to what has been identified as a torture prison, as a prison that the warden of CICOT in El Salvador said is the prison no one ever leaves. That is simply a violation of the constitutional rights of prisoners. Prisoners who are citizens of this country are United States citizens, and they have the rights of citizens. And so I don't have any faith that Pam Bondi will, in her research, will feel bound by that. But that is the state of the law, and that's why so many of us have been looking at this very closely and preparing. Because I think, as you alluded to earlier, Rachel, when the plane takes off, the plane takes off. That's what happened to Mr. Abregu Garcia. This administration has made clear they're not interested in lifting a finger to get people back, even people who were wrongfully well, they were all wrongfully shipped to El Salvador, but certainly this individual was, by concession, wrongfully sent to El Salvador. So it's very, very alarming, very, very frightening, and something we have to get out ahead of.
Sherrilyn Ifill, Howard Law School professor and friend to this show for a very long time. Thank you for your time tonight. We're going to stay very closely on this story. We'd love to have you back soon as it
Thank you.
As it develops. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. All right. Much more news ahead here tonight. Stay with us. So he was a career staffer. He'd worked his way up through the ranks of the Social Security Administration. He'd started at the very bottom, made it all the way up to the top of the agency. He'd been there more than 25 years. He really knew the agency, really knew the program. He really knows the stakes for Americans. He also knows the rules. And he personally tried to push back on a new plan from the Trump administration. According to new reporting from the Washington Post, he told his Trump-installed superior at the Social Security Administration that what the administration was planning to do was, quote, illegal and cruel and, quote, risked declaring the wrong people dead. The Trump administration responded by having security physically escort him out of the building. They marched him out, put him on administrative leave. The plan this 25-year veteran career staffer was trying to stop at Social Security is something that we just started learning about last week. Social Security, under Donald Trump, is moving thousands of people to the agency's death master file, which means they're knowingly misclassifying living people as dead. Because when you're listed as dead by Social Security, you can lose basically everything almost instantly. Your health insurance, your home, your bank account, your job, your credit card, even your phone, everything. So these people are alive, but they are knowingly classifying them as dead to make it impossible for them to live in this country. They're imposing on them a kind of civil and financial death. Since we reported on that story last week, people in and around the Social Security Administration have been jumping up and down and shouting about this. Just this one Washington Post piece has 15 sources for this story. Current and former Social Security officials trying to tell the world what is happening and why this is so scary. The Post reviewed records showing that the Trump administration has already added more than 6,000 people to the death file. The White House, quote, told the Post that the roughly 6,000 immigrants they have done this to all have links to either terrorist activity or criminal records. Do they? The records the Post reviewed showed those more than 6,000 people included a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, and two 16-year-olds, as well as one person in their 80s and a handful in their 70s. They're all terrorists? Even the 13-year-old? All of those people now legally dead, according to Social Security, which means, again, no bank account, no job, no property, no credit card, nothing. One source warned the Washington Post that, yes, they're doing this to immigrants, but this is very clearly something that they could do to anyone. Quote, anybody granted the appropriate permissions within Social Security could mark someone as dead without having to prove their demise in any way. Employees' fear was partly that a bad actor who gained access to government credentials could label groups of living individuals as dead to target them for punishment. Some of those raising the alarm worried specifically that the Trump administration might try to use the database to go after people the president dislikes. Washington Post also has a single source telling them that within Social Security, the concern about this misuse of the death master file is so high that the general counsel's office inside Social Security is, quote, preparing an opinion that will find the Trump administration's unprecedented use of the death database to be a violation of privacy law. In other words, to be illegal. The opinion will take issue with the agency knowingly and falsely declaring that living people are dead. Now, NBC News has not confirmed that reporting. Obviously, if the general counsel of the administration did that, that might be a big deal. But whether or not that happens, the level of alarm over what the Trump administration is doing with the Social Security Administration right now is very clear. Former Biden Social Security Commissioner Martin O'Malley described what they're doing, having your name added that death master file, as, quote, tantamount to financial murder. Martin O'Malley joins us here live next. Stay with us.